Right, hello. So welcome to this part of my series on modular synths. It's about the fifth time I've tried to record this because I keep forgetting to press record on the flipping camera. So if you're watching this, that means I've got it right this time. What an idiot. Right, on this one, we're going to look at probably one of my favourite modules, the sample and hold. Okay, this is the Dopefer A148 sample and hold. It's a dual sample and hold. We've got basically these top three are the same as the bottom three. I think the bottom three apparently is better for track and hold, and the top one is better for sample and hold. I'm not going to go into track and hold at the moment. I'm just going to look at sample and hold for now. I might do that on a later video. Right, so what I'm going to try and do is, in plain English, try and explain what sample and hold does, because sample and hold used to confuse the hell out of me, but I understand it now. So the sample and hold out, that isn't the output is going to go to modulate something. So that might be the cutoff frequency of the filter. It might be the frequency modulation, basically the pitch of the VCO, something like that. Right. So that's its output. So for it to work, it needs something to sample and it needs something to trigger it. So to get the traditional, sorry, just checking my camera's recording. It is. Again, if you're watching this, it's pretty obvious it's recording, but it's not to me. Right, to get kind of like the classic sample and hold sound, which to me is the sound of a modular synth. Right, when I think of a modular synth, I hear this sound in my head, which I'm going to recreate for you now. So to get that classic sample and hold thing, the best way is to use a random something that's going to fire out random frequencies, which is our white noise, right? Our white noise is going to be our best friend, or our coloured noise will do the same thing. We'll look at differences between the two. Right, so we're going to patch the white noise to the sample in. Right, so that is now sampling that white noise. All right. So basically what white noise just fires out, it's kind of everything across the audio spectrum, every frequency. So it just kind of goes like that. So if this is like your frequency on your waveform, which is why it just looks like a mess of lines, okay, it's just randomly firing out every frequency there is. Now what we need to do is we need to tell the sample and hold when to actually sample whatever frequency it's at, and we use that with the trigger input. So to just kind of demonstrate this, hopefully so it makes sense, I'm going to use the keyboard from the microbrute as my gate on and off for now, which at the moment is going into my envelope generator. So I'm going to plug that into the trigger in. So every time I press a key on the keyboard, it's going to open the gate and it will allow it to sample. And so you can hear the effect of it, hopefully clearly. We are going to take the output of the sample hold and we're going to go to the input, the frequency modulation input. This is the linear frequency. It doesn't particularly matter, but it's basically going to modulate the frequency of the VCO, which in other words, in English, is it's going to make the pitch go up and down. All right, so I'm going to plug that into there. Now, we're not hearing anything at the moment because I've got to turn the gain up on my VCA because I've not got I've bypassed the envelope at the moment. So what's going to happen is the white noise is doing its random kind of noise thing. When I press a key on the keyboard, it's going to sample it at whatever frequency it's at when I press a key. So when I press a key, say now, dump, okay, so at that frequency, it's going to sample that and it's going to hold it and it's going to keep that note until it receives another trigger and then it will sample at whatever frequency it's at then. So let's just demonstrate. So this is what it's on at the moment. Doesn't matter what key I press, okay, because I'm not sending out pitch information to this at the moment. So I'm just pressing middle C all the time. So at the moment, right, the white noise is going into the trigger input. It's doing this. When I press a key now, okay, it's now stopped at that frequency. Now it's sampling again, but it's held it because it's not had another trigger. So when I now do it again, press a key now, it's now sampled that one, and it's going to go again. White noise is doing this, and then it sampled it at that. Okay, so hopefully you can. Hopefully that sort of makes sense with lots of this going off. That all it's doing is it's sampling these random frequencies, and when we tell it at a certain point via the trigger in, via the gate, to kind of stop on that one, sample that one, and you're going to hold that one until it receives the next trigger input. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now, obviously, I could kind of just press the keys on the keyboard loads. Like that. So this is me pressing the keys, going da 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 da. Okay, so it's sampling now pretty quick. Obviously, I don't want to have to kind of stand and press that. I could do it by a sequencer off the mini microbrute. If I just turn the sequencer on. Again, it doesn't matter what notes are on the sequencer. So it's going to just randomly sample all of those. But obviously we've not necessarily all got a sequence that we can use. So what we can use to for the trigger in, let's put that back in here. And again, the most traditional way of getting the classic sample and hold sound is to use the LFO and to use the square wave of the LFO, which is basically kind of like note on note on. It's kind of constant on and off. So we're going to patch the square wave. There's the end of my ridiculously long cable for a short patch. Into the trigger in. And then we turn the gain up on here. Okay, you can hear it's now doing that on its own, right? I'm not, both hands look, I'm not touching anything. That's both my hands. And we can control the speed of that with the frequency of the LFO. Put a bit of delay on it. But then you can mess about with your filter. Okay, so the classic modular synth sample and hold sound is how you would create it. Now I like to use it because that's a little bit random for my liking. Okay, just like firing out random notes. You can get an audio quantizer-y thing that will make it a little bit more musical, but my favourite way of using the sample and hold is to modulate the cutoff frequency. So this basically has the effect of going like randomly turning the frequency dial up and down and kind of in steps, right? So it'll make more sense when you hear it. So if I plug it into here, and it works nicely with if you have quite a high resonance, and I've used this sound in quite a few of my tracks. Okay, because it's quite musical because it stays on the same note, but it's just different frequencies. Obviously you can affect it by wherever we dial in. Okay, so that's with the white noise. With the coloured noise you can get slightly wider kind of range because if I remember rightly, I think the blue noise takes up the frequencies higher and the red noise kind of brings in lower frequencies. So let's have a listen. Let's bring in just... Right, so we've got white noise and then we'll go straight to blue. Bring that up. Okay, so that's going to give us some higher, particularly if you do it on the pitch. Let's try on the pitch. Okay, so that's going to have a slightly wider range, right? It's going to go up a bit higher. If we bring in some red, get rid of some of the blue. Okay. Actually, no, I can never remember the right way around. I think the red is the higher range and the blue is the lower range, but I must check that. But anyway, by messing about with those, you can get a range that you want. Let's just go back to... and let's put a bit of delay on it. Okay, so somewhere kind of like middle on the two works nicely for me. And the random output's going to do pretty much the same kind of thing. Right. Now, if I send out pitch information as well from the keyboard of the microbrute, obviously I can then, because that's sending out the pitch 1 volt per octave to the VCO, I can then start to get kind of a tune going. Okay, because I can send pitch out information out. I could actually run the sequencer as well off the microbrute and it will have this effect. So this is without the sequencer running. Put it on that note. Okay. Oops, sorry. And then we'll run the sequencer. Okay, so a bit noisy, but yeah. So that's going to kind of sample and hold based on the speed of the sequencer. Okay, so we can get the LFO to kind of go in time with without using any kind of MIDI clock or anything, using the reset button, the reset input, I should say. So the way I would do that is all my gear is connected up via MIDI, and it kind of all comes from the MX1 and the TR8, which sends MIDI clock out to everything. So that's going to be sending MIDI clock to the microbrute. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to take the LFO output of the microbrute, and it's going to go to the reset in, and I'm using a square wave on LFO on the microbrute. So that's going to fire out kind of reset signals that will kind of keep resetting the LFO based on the MIDI clock that it receives from everything else, and it will then keep this sample and hold in time with whatever speed that the song is going. So I will demonstrate for you. So at the moment, where are we going here? Okay, so at the moment you can hear it's going really fast. So if I press play on the TR8, you'll hear the drums come in, and you'll hear that slow down. It will go in time with the drums. Okay, so if I slow down the TR8 now. Okay, speeding it up. Kind of works sort of at this speed, sort of works better at faster tempos. But hopefully you can hear that sort of staying in time with the drums. When you go a bit slower, it's a little bit. Oh, that's okay, that's getting it. So you can get some really nice kind of sounds with that. Stick a bit of delay on it. And you can mess about then with different rates settings on the microbrute. At the moment, I've got on the LFO, I've got the amount up at full, and I've got the rate up at full, which will give me that sort of fast, sort of 16th note kind of vibe. It's a little bit hit and miss on the LFO because you've got to get it in the right place, but you can then slow it down, which I'll demonstrate now, to get a slower sample and hold thing going off in time with the track, like this. So this is with the rate dial on the microbrute kind of set at 12 o'clock. Which is more kind of like an 8th note sort of feel. If you go right to the bottom, so with the rate dial turned all the way down on the microbrute. So it's a little bit hit and miss, but if you get that sweet spot, it will stay nice and in time. And then you can. Okay, and that's how you can get it to stay in time. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into sample and hold and makes some sort of sense. I've tried to explain it as simply as I can and kind of as I understand it. But if you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the box below. If you've got any suggestions for any further videos or anything to do with Modular or anything to do with synthesizers, then stick them in the comments box below. Usual things, if you wouldn't mind liking the video and subscribing to my channel, that would be much appreciated. Try and watch a few of the adverts because it gives me a few quid as well, and it helps me buy more modules for you. And check my music out on Spotify, etc, etc. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next part. Cheers.